It began, as most tragedies do, in silence. Not the peaceful silence of two people who had grown comfortable with each other's company, but the heavy kind, the silence that pressed against the walls, that seeped into the corners of their home until even the ticking clock felt intrusive. He noticed it first in the evenings. The dinners they once shared had become ritual without warmth, meals consumed with eyes fixed anywhere but on each other. She chewed slowly, mechanically, as if her mind were elsewhere, far away from the table, far away from him. He told himself it was stress, fatigue, the wear and tear of ordinary life. But deep down, a sharper truth gnawed at him. Her laughter, once easy and unguarded, had vanished. She smiled now, but only in fragments, thin, practiced gestures that never reached her eyes. Those eyes, the same ones he had once fallen into, seemed clouded with distance, always searching for something beyond his reach. When he spoke, she listened, but the warmth of listening had fled. Her replies were measured, polite, a script rather than a conversation. The man, ordinary by most measures, carried himself with the dignity of someone who valued loyalty above all. He worked with steady hands and returned home with steady heart, certain that devotion was enough to sustain a bond. Yet each day revealed how fragile devotion could seem when one heart no longer beat in rhythm with the other. He began noticing small shifts. The glow of her phone late into the night, the quick way she turned the screen when he entered the room. The faint perfume that lingered when she returned from errands that should not have taken so long. Even the way she dressed had changed, more deliberate, more precise, as though she were preparing for an audience he had never been invited to join. He said nothing. Words, he feared, would shatter the fragile illusion that still bound them. Yet silence was not safety, it was surrender. And surrender had never suited him. In the quiet of his thoughts, he searched for meaning. Was he not enough? Was it his ordinariness that had left her restless? He was not tall enough, not wealthy enough, not remarkable in any way that the world applauded. But he was human, stubbornly human, with flaws worn openly and love offered without disguise. And though he could not yet name it, he sensed a storm gathering, something larger than a simple betrayal, something that whispered of temptation beyond the familiar scale of human weakness. He felt it in the way her gaze drifted past him, towards something unseen, as if she were measuring him against a force he could neither match nor comprehend. Still, he endured the silence. He held his ground, believing, hoping, that love, once planted, could survive even the coldest season. But as the nights grew longer and her distance widened, he began to understand. Endurance alone would not be enough. The bond was breaking, and he was powerless to stop it. The first signs of the intruder were not physical. They arrived as shadows, half-spoken phrases, lingering silences, a brightness in her eyes that had nothing to do with him. She no longer came home weary but invigorated, carrying an energy that unsettled him more than exhaustion ever had. Something was feeding her spirit, and it was not his presence. He began piecing the truth together in fragments. A message left open on her screen, a laugh he overheard through a door she thought was closed, a slip of tone in her voice when she spoke about new opportunities. Each clue was small, insignificant in isolation, but together they wove a tapestry of betrayal too intricate to dismiss. What disturbed him most was the way she described it, this thing, this someone, this presence, without ever naming it outright. She called it different, said it was more than ordinary, that it awakened feelings she had thought long buried. In her words he heard awe, even reverence, as though she were speaking not of a man but of a force, something beyond human scale. He confronted her gently at first, asking where she had been, who she had seen. Her answers were careful, evasive, like a dancer spinning away from his reach. And when she finally met his gaze, she did not deny. Instead, she whispered words that pierced deeper than any outright confession. It's bigger, stronger, beyond anything I've ever known. The sentence echoed inside him like a thunderclap. She had not said better, but the implication was heavier than the word itself. Bigger, stronger, beyond. These were not measures of love but of dominance, of scale, of some unspoken comparison in which he already knew the outcome. He pictured it in his mind, though she had given him no clear shape to hold. Was it another man, broader and more commanding? Was it a machine, sleek and flawless, where he was worn and human? Was it something else entirely, something unnatural, a temptation that transcended the flesh? The more he wondered, the more monstrous the image grew. Her distance became sharper after that night. She returned later, spoke less, and when she did speak, her words carried the weight of pity rather than love. He saw it in her eyes. She was already gone, already surrendered to whatever force she had found. Yet beneath the devastation, a spark lit within him. It was anger, yes, but more than that, it was a recognition of the ancient struggle humans had always faced. Temptation had many forms: gods, beasts, machines, even other hearts. And always, humanity had stood small against something larger, stronger, seemingly beyond reach. But history whispered the truth he clung to now: the small endured, the fragile resisted, the underestimated survived. Still, he could not yet decide whether he had been betrayed by another man or by something greater, something inhuman. And perhaps, he thought bitterly, the answer no longer mattered. What mattered was the fracture it had carved in him, and the question it left behind. Could humanity, his humanity, ever be enough against something that claimed to be beyond it? The truth did not strike like lightning. It arrived quietly, with the weight of inevitability. He had known for weeks, perhaps months, that the storm was building. Yet knowing did not dull the pain when the moment finally came. It was late, past the hour when their home should have been filled with the safety of sleep. She slipped through the door as if the night itself had carried her in. Her hair was disheveled, her cheeks flushed, her steps unsteady in a way that betrayed not weakness, but exhilaration. She did not see him waiting in the dim light of the living room. Or perhaps she had known he would be there and no longer cared. "Where were you?" His voice was steady, but it cost him to keep it so. She froze, not in guilt, but in calculation. He watched her weigh the usefulness of lies, and then discard them. Her lips parted, but no excuses came. Only silence, heavy, suffocating, final. Was it him, he asked. He had no name to give the rival, no face to pin upon the figure that haunted his imagination. And yet the question was not vague. Both of them knew precisely what he meant. Her eyes dropped, then lifted again, filled with a sorrow that felt more cruel than anger would have been. "Yes," she whispered, and with that word the last fragile threads of their bond unraveled. It was not only the admission that broke him, it was the way she said it. No shame, no struggle, no fight to protect what they had shared. Just quiet acknowledgement, as though the decision had already been made long before this night, and he had simply been too human, too blind, to see it. He pressed her further, desperate for some detail that might make the betrayal comprehensible.
"Why?
Was I not enough?" Her answer cut deeper than confession. "You're good, but he's more.
Bigger.
Stronger. Beyond anything I ever imagined." The words landed like blows. He wanted to shout, to rage, to demand what more could mean, what measure of worth could eclipse loyalty, what scale could weigh a human heart and declare it insufficient. But his voice failed him. He sat instead in silence, shoulders heavy, eyes fixed on the floor as if searching for an anchor in the shifting ground of his life. In that moment, he understood the scope of his loss. It was not only her love that had been stolen, it was his sense of place in the world, the quiet faith that being human, imperfect, flawed, devoted, was enough. She had chosen something else, something that mocked the scale of his existence. The rival loomed in his mind like a myth. A colossus, faceless yet towering, a presence that dwarfed him without even trying. It mattered little whether it was man, machine, or something beyond either. What mattered was the message. He had been measured, and he had been found small. The weight of humiliation pressed upon him. For a heartbeat, he considered surrendering to it, letting the betrayal hollow him out until nothing remained. But somewhere in the cracks of his despair, a quieter voice stirred. Humans endure. Humans rise. Humans, though small, are never finished. The thought was fragile, flickering. Yet in the ruins of his trust, it was all he had left. The house felt smaller after that night, as though the walls themselves had absorbed her confession and were now leaning inward, pressing down on him with suffocating force. Every chair, every photograph, every shadow carried her absence, yet also her betrayal. The temptation was to run, to flee from reminders of what had been taken from him. But he did not run. He sat in the stillness, and he breathed. Pain clawed at him. Rage begged for release. Yet he refused to let either define him. He understood, with startling clarity, that to lash out, to crumble, to beg, these were the reactions she expected. They would make her choice seem justified, would prove her unspoken claim that he was too small, too ordinary to stand beside something greater. So he chose differently. He rose. In the days that followed, he shed no tears where she could see them. He did not shout into the void or demand explanations that could never heal him. Instead, he poured himself into the simple rituals of survival. He worked. He walked. He cooked meals for one and ate them without haste, savoring the act of choosing for himself. Each motion was an act of defiance, not against her or even the rival, but against the voice inside him that whispered he had been broken. The rival remained faceless in his mind, some blend of man and myth, larger and stronger than he could ever hope to be. Yet the more he thought of it, the less it mattered. Size, strength, dominance, these were shallow measures, the kind that dazzled for a moment but faded with time. What endured was will. What endured was spirit. And spirit, he realized, was uniquely human. She might never see it. She might forever believe she had traded up, that she had chosen the extraordinary over the ordinary. But he knew better. History was filled with beings greater than man, giants, gods, machines, and still humanity had endured. Not because they were stronger, not because they were faster, but because they carried within them something immeasurable, the refusal to yield. One evening, as the sun bled across the horizon, he stepped outside and stood at the threshold of his home. The air was cool, tinged with the scent of rain, and for the first time in weeks, he did not feel the weight of loss pressing down on him. He felt something else instead, possibility. The betrayal would not vanish. The wound would remain. But wounds, he knew, became scars, and scars told stories of survival. His story was not over. It had only been broken open, made raw, made human. They may call it bigger, stronger, beyond anything, he murmured into the dusk. But they don't understand. Beyond anything is where we begin. With that, he turned from the ruins of what had been and walked toward the uncertain light of what might come. His steps were steady, his shoulders squared. For though he had been wounded, he was not destroyed. Humans are never destroyed.